The 8th gen is the console generation that I, and likely most of the people watching this, are the most familiar with. The games I've played from this generation are all from the Nintendo 3DS, Wii U, PlayStation 4, and Nintendo Switch. However, I won't be speaking about the Switch until a later date. With that said, let's start with this generation's first console. Box Boy is a puzzle platformer that isn't very visually impressive and doesn't feel super great to control. Instead, the appeal comes from the main character's unique abilities, which leads to some really interesting puzzles to solve. The game's also made by HAL Laboratory, which is pretty cool. Beta. Cars 2 may be one of the worst video games I've ever played, and it's really funny. If you're looking for a fun, bad game to play, I'd say this one's an alright choice. That being said, it's pretty bad, so I wouldn't be spending any money on it. D-tier. Face Raiders is such a confusing game to me. It was obviously trying to demonstrate the capabilities of the 3DS, but just isn't very fun. I wouldn't waste my time with this game. D-tier. I like Majora's Mask 3D, but I've had it for a couple years now and I still haven't gotten around to finishing it, likely because of the platform it's on. I know I'd like the game if I really sat down and got through it, but there's something about handheld games that makes me unable to really dedicate myself to getting far into longer games. Until I finally get into it, I can't put it any higher than a B tier. The Mii Maker on the 3DS isn't too different from the Mii channel on Wii, but it has added camera functionality, which is always really funny to use. C tier. New Super Mario Bros. 2 was the first game I played on my 3DS. I like it, but I understand that it's nothing special. The coin gimmick in the game is fun, but it means you get so many lives that there isn't much challenge. Overall, it's a good game, but nothing to write home about. B tier. It's very cool that Super Smash Bros. For Nintendo 3DS exists, but it's pretty clear when playing that it doesn't really work that well. The hardware is just too limited for a game like Smash Bros, and the circle pad feels awful to control your character with. At the end of the day, it's still Smash 4 and I'm happy to play it every once in a while, but it's probably the last Smash game I'd want to play out of any of them. C tier. Twilight Princess Picross introduced me to Picross, which is now my favourite puzzle game. There's not really much to say about the game, it's just a pretty standard version of Picross with some cool side modes. B tier. Mario Tennis Ultra Smash is just tennis, but the players take turns getting a power-up that guarantees they'll win that round. My friend and I once played the game for about an hour, and we unlocked every character and played through every mode. The game can be fun for like half an hour every once in a while, but the overall lack of content and substance makes the game feel pretty underwhelming. Overall, it's a pretty nothing game, but it can be fun for a couple rounds. C tier. The Wii U's Mii Maker is the same thing as the 3DS one, just on a TV, which makes it slightly more fun in a group setting. C tier. NES Remix wasn't everything I was hoping it would be. The emulation quality is terrible, and the game just isn't that fun. Overall, it was pretty underwhelming and I didn't like it very much. Low C tier. I played New Super Mario Bros. U because I enjoyed 2 and I thought it might be fun as well. However, I did not make it past the third world. The game constantly sends you back to the world map and the load times are absolutely atrocious. The levels themselves are fine, but the constant loading screens really hold the game back. C tier. The online for the original Splatoon was pretty fun, but it shut down earlier this year. However, the game's story mode is still available and it's great. Although short, it has a great soundtrack, memorable moments, and no boring filler. It also has a really fun story that gets more in depth and honestly kind of dark as you unlock more of the scrolls that are hidden throughout the levels. I highly recommend it to anyone with a Wii U, as it only costs a few dollars pre-owned. A tier. Super Smash Bros. For Wii U is a pretty good game. I think the custom moves are a really fun idea and the game has a good roster. However, it's not different enough to Ultimate that I'd ever want to play it over that one, unless I wanted to play with custom moves. The loading times are also pretty ridiculous, taking even longer than the 3DS version. That being said, the game's still Smash Bros, so it's always a good time. B tier. Super Mario 3D World is a really fun game. However, nothing about it is super iconic or memorable besides the Super Bell and the final worlds. The game's nothing groundbreaking, but it's a fun Mario game that I'd highly recommend if you haven't played it, although you should probably play the Switch version. B tier. I know that Terraria isn't a Wii U game, but it's the only version of it that I've ever gotten really into, so I'm ranking it purely based on the content from the Wii U one. I'm definitely not the most qualified person to talk about this game, but I like how there are a lot of bosses and cool armor sets to collect. It was super fun going into it not knowing anything about the game and experiencing it blind with a friend. I found it pretty enjoyable, but I don't think I'd go back to it. B tier. Wind Waker HD is such a good game. It has some of the best dungeon designs out of any Zelda I've played, and the story is really good. Also, the graphics are quite different from the original, and I honestly don't know which one I like better. They each look really nice in their own ways. The only real complaint I have about the game is the Triforce quest at the end. That was a really annoying part of the game that left a bad taste in my mouth for a really long time. Still, it's an amazing game and an easy A tier. I'd say Beat Saber uses the capabilities of VR the most effectively out of any VR game I've seen. It doesn't involve the player moving around at all. Instead, everything comes to them, which leads to the best possible immersion, in my opinion. I enjoy it quite a lot, but the PS4 version's controls feel really unreliable, and the game doesn't support community-made levels. C tier. I think Brawlhalla is one of the better free-to-play online games I've played, and it's an alright platform fighter with some really fun mechanics. However, I see the game as more of an alternative to Smash Bros. Rather than a replacement that I would ever rather play. If you don't have a Switch and want to play a platform fighter online, I think you should play Slippy, but if you don't want to play Slippy, I think Brawlhalla is a good option. B tier. Catherine Full Body is a very cool game. The game is a puzzle game about climbing towers made of blocks, but it has story sections between each climb where the main character is conflicted about whether he should continue dating his current girlfriend Catherine or move on and date another woman he's interested in, who is also called Catherine. In Full Body, there's a new love interest added to the game, Rin. I do like Rin as a character, but I don't think her addition added anything of much value to the game as a whole. Many people think that she worsens Vincent's internal conflict, and that Catherine Full Body is worse off because of her addition, and I honestly agree with that sentiment. Also, the ending system in the game is really confusing, and you can get some really underwhelming endings if you don't meet some specific conditions. That happened to me, and the ending of the game didn't feel very satisfying. Overall, Catherine Full Body is a really fun, thought-provoking game that's super cool and I like it a lot, but I'd recommend Catherine Classic to anyone interested in giving Catherine a go. B tier. Fortnite is not the same game it used to be, which has some upsides and downsides. I don't play it very often anymore because I don't find it as fun as other games, but I'll sometimes play a round or two when my dad's playing. Overall, I'd say it's pretty good, but it goes through drastic changes so often that it's hard to rank. B tier. Gang Beasts is a ragdoll fighter, which might just be the most stupid yet fun genre of games. Gang Beasts is one of the most popular ragdoll fighters out there, and it's for a good reason. The game controls great for its genre and is really fun overall. However, the limited map selection can be a bit annoying when the matches are so short, which generally leads me to play the game for no more than half an hour at a time. B tier. My friend and I borrowed Garfield Kart Furious Racing from our local library a few months ago, thinking it would be a funny, bad game to play as a joke. After 2 races, we couldn't take it anymore and had to turn the game off. The game is just so unbelievably terrible that it just isn't fun and you shouldn't waste your time with it, even as a joke. D tier. Just Dance 2017 is just Dance without the need for controllers, but with the need for a subscription service in order to be able to play the vast majority of levels. Thank you, Ubisoft. D tier. People make fun of the Knack series all the time, but I remember enjoying Knack 2 when I was younger. However, when replaying the game to get footage for this video, I started to understand the criticisms a bit more. The game is very repetitive, only having basic combat and platforming challenges, all revolving around the same enemies and mechanics in each chapter. That being said, I do think the game's environments and Knack himself are very visually appealing. Overall, the game's playable, but I don't see myself coming back to it anytime soon. C tier. LEGO Star Wars The Force Awakens is fine from what I remember. The game isn't as good as the complete saga as it lacks the variety and overall charm of that game. It's far from unplayable, but there are so many better options out there and I'll likely never come back to the game. C tier. Little Big Planet 3 is kind of just more Little Big Planet, but not as good. The new characters aren't particularly interesting to me and just make the game feel needlessly complicated. The game also has less content than the original and a much stronger focus on dialogue and story. The game's alright, but I would rather play the original any day. C tier. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite is the only traditional fighting game I've played. I played it a few years ago at a friend's house a few times and actually found it to be a lot of fun. B tier. I don't really like Minecraft Bedrock Edition. It's just different enough to Java Edition that it feels cheap and really bad to play every time I revisit it. Also, it's really buggy, which can lead to some funny clips, but a bad experience for players. At the end of the day, it's still Minecraft at its core, so C tier. Monopoly Plus is just Monopoly, but on a virtual board. The game's alright, but not really any more fun than playing it with a physical board, so C tier. Everything you've heard about Overcooked is true. The game involves 2 to 4 players preparing meals in a kitchen and leads to shouting matches like no other. The characters have extremely simple control schemes involving only 1 stick and 2 buttons. I love when games like this put extremely simple controls into overcomplicated, hectic environments. It makes for a chaotic experience that is surprisingly easy for new players to pick up. A tier. I never owned Plants vs Zombies Garden Warfare 2 for myself, only ever playing it at a friend's house, but I remember having fun with it. It was a pretty basic hero shooter that I remember having really long loading screens, like multiple minutes when starting the game. Overall, I think it was just alright. C tier. PlayStation VR Worlds is an excellent tech demo for the PSVR. It has 5 smaller games within it that can be used to demonstrate the capabilities of VR to new users, and I think it does this really well. However, each game is short and not the most replayable, so it's mostly a novelty. C tier. I never finished Ratchet & Clank, but I remember really liking what I played. Upon replaying the introduction to get footage for this video, I was really surprised by just how enjoyable it was. The game looks really pretty, controls great, and is actually pretty funny. I'm definitely coming back to this game sometime soon. Until then, B tier. Rec Room is like Roblox with VR support and proximity chat. The paintball game and medieval quest game are the only modes I've really played in length, but they were fun from what I can remember. However, the game as a whole isn't that enjoyable, so I can't rank it all that high. C tier. Whenever I have a big group of friends over, I like to bring out SingStar. Karaoke is easily one of the best late night party games. However, access to buy new songs shut down a few years ago due to licensing issues, so the game has lost a lot of its value. C tier. As much as I loved Spider-Man when I played it, I never got around to finishing it. The game has a great story and feels really good to control, but I just played other things instead. It's a good game that I know deserves all the praise it gets, I just need to revisit it one day. B tier. Spider-Man Far From Home VR is just a Spider-Man swinging simulator in VR. If you have a PSVR, I'd recommend downloading it as it's free and is fun for a few minutes. However, it's very lacking in terms of content and feels really soulless, so it doesn't have much value as an actual game. Low C tier. In the Spider-Man Homecoming VR experience, you do target practice, get attacked, and then the game ends. Again, it's free, so you can't really complain, but there's actually nothing to this one, so it really sucks. D tier. Star Wars Battlefront is my go-to multiplayer game on the PS4. I never had PS Plus, so I haven't played the online modes at all, but the offline stuff is really fun. The battle modes have really good maps to choose from, and the co-op survival mode might be the best co-op game I've played on the PS4. The game is really cheap nowadays, so if you're looking for a fun offline multiplayer game, I'd highly recommend it. Very high B tier. I never got into Battlefront 2 the same way I did the first one. I remember liking the story mode a lot, but the multiplayer stuff was really lacking in comparison to the first. Again, I never had access to the online modes, which is a shame because I've heard that's where most of the fun in this game comes from. From my experiences with it, it was just okay as a whole, not really anything I'd go back to. C tier. Tearaway Unfolded was a really cool game to me when I played it. It's very similar to Little Big Planet in that everything looks like arts and crafts and is very customizable, and the game was just very charming overall. B tier. The Last of Us is structured in such a way where each mission leads into the next seamlessly. This leads to incredible immersion that made the game nearly impossible for me to put down. The game hooked me so much that I beat it in 2 sittings. It's a truly phenomenal experience that I'd highly recommend to anyone. A tier. The Playroom is a tech demo for the PlayStation 4 that came bundled with every system. The game does a good job showing off some of the capabilities of the DualShock 4 and PlayStation 4 camera, but doesn't do so in a way that's very engaging for more than 2 minutes. I don't see anyone playing this outside of the first day they get their PS4. D tier. The Playroom VR, on the other hand, is essentially Wii Sports for the PSVR. The minigames perfectly show how VR can be used in creative ways in collaboration with a traditional screen. The whole game is a really fun experience when playing with friends and is made even better by being completely free. My only issue with the game is that it doesn't have much value in single player. B tier. I've only played Ultimate Chicken Horse once at a friend's house, but the game really stood out to me. It's such a chaotic, silly game that I really enjoyed. I hope to pick it up for myself one day. B tier.